London, of course, prides itself as being one of the world's great financial capitals. Is this reality or myth? Is loss of visual integrity through the hodgepodge of ever more bizarrely named skyscrapers a defining symbol of economic strength or virility, to adopt the term applied to St. Petersburg's Gazprom Tower, or a sign of serious underlying weakness? In 1992, there was a serious crash in the London commercial property market. The bankruptcy of one building alone at Canary Wharf amounted to £450 sterling at 1990 values. Banks collectively lost huge sums of money, but at the time were able to absorb them. One of the most remarkable statistics to come out of this fiasco was that the late 1980s boom in the construction of new offices in the centre of London had created so much surplus floor space that it would have needed an additional 2 million population in the London catchment area in order to supply the number of workers to fully occupy them. We call this process planning. Indeed, it is even qualified as forward planning, as if planning could be anything else. In 2008, the crisis was far worse. The losses from speculative property investments, both at home and abroad, were such that several major United Kingdom banks, all with major investments in property in the City of London, had to be bailed out and in effect nationalised in order to prevent them going bankrupt. It had long been held as received knowledge that tall buildings were essential to the status of the City of London as a leading world financial centre. Are we, and here I'm using an ambiguity in the English language which I hope translates, are we speaking here of tall stories or tall stories? Liverpool. From the 1930s onwards, Liverpool suffered a terminal decline as a major transatlantic port city. From the early 2000s, a number of initiatives aimed at urban renaissance were programmed. Key Parts became a World Heritage Site in 2004. The city was European Capital of Culture in 2008. Much has been achieved in the city centre in terms of the cultural life of the city, and some key historic buildings and complexes have been saved from demolition and adapted to a plethora of vibrant new uses. At the same time, there are two serious negatives to this. Firstly, the haphazard way in which the historic waterfront has been developed, which you can see on the left-hand side of this photograph, without regard for the historic character and urban landscape. The architecture critic of the Times newspaper, Tom Dykhoff, has described the new waterfront as comprising frivolous, flash-in-the-pan architecture that could have been built by anyone, anywhere. And secondly, the £1 billion investment by one of the United Kingdom's leading property developers, Grosvenor Estates, in Liverpool One, a huge new retail centre, also with offices and apartments, with a large number of nationally renowned stores on the historic site of the port city's first enclosed dock. The impact on the surrounding area has been devastating. In 2009, a retail survey was undertaken by Experian on 15 major United Kingdom cities. At 42.3%, Liverpool, and I quote, Liverpool gains the ignoble title of highest vacancy rate in a major UK city as the true cost of Liverpool One becomes apparent. We also call this planning. Can you imagine over 40% of all shops in Lublin Centre being empty, and the effect that this would have both on the visual integrity and the economic development of the city? Boom and bust cannot be equated with sustainable economic development. contemporary architecture and the cloning of cities. The distinctiveness and sense of place in cities across the world is rapidly becoming lost, with consequential loss of identity, community spirit, social cohesion, and individual competitiveness, which is one of the keys to sustainable economic development. The waterfronts of the twin cities of Liverpool, England, and Shanghai, China, mirror each other both visually and functionally. To quote, "Never before has the world been so firmly in the grip of an establishment like the present architectural one, the most rigid in the history of art. All modern cities, as they are rebuilt, grow to resemble each other. Rio and Hong Kong, to take two with rather similar settings, are clothing themselves more and more in the same style. London and Tokyo become closer each year. Is this the inevitable future for all historic cities? A characterless descent from infinite and wondrous diversity into uniformity and banality? And how does this help the competitiveness of their economies?" Good design. A key question that needs to be addressed is, can architecture, properly understood, exist in isolation from its context? Here I'm quoting from two publications, a 1944 publication called Good and Bad Manners in Architecture, an essay on the social aspects of civic design. In this book, Tristan Edwards contrasts selfish, presumptuous and rude buildings with polite and sociable ones. And in his seminal book, Townscape, 1961, Gordon Cullen defined the essence of good urban design as the agreement to differ within a recognized tolerance of behavior. Unfortunately, the principal international references give out confused messages. The 1964 Venice Charter for the Conservation and Restoration of Monuments, the overarching doctrinal document of the International Council on Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS, states that where components are replaced, they should be integrated harmoniously, but be distinct from the architectural composition and bear a contemporary stamp. The 1975 European Charter from the Council of Europe, which encompasses the architectural heritage including urban areas, introduced the concept of integrated conservation. The 1987 Washington Charter for Historic Towns and Urban Areas, ICOMOS again, speaks of harmonious adaptation to contemporary life. But the 2005 Vienna Memorandum, which is a UNESCO document, focused on historic urban landscapes, adopts a fundamentalist modernist line by insisting that contemporary interventions should avoid all forms of pseudo-historical design as they constitute a denial of both the historical and the contemporary alike. In the Canadian city of Quebec, official guidance that dates from the 1980s grades interventions in the urban fabric into 6 categories, from total disregard to their surroundings, through integration with the established architectural language but using modern materials, to facadism. One of the most quoted examples in the city of integration with the established architectural language but using modern materials would, by modernists especially, be derided under the pejorative label of pastiche.